Watch the Newlywed Game weekdays at 5:30. The time now 5 o'clock.
This is the ABC Evening News with Harry Reisner and Barbara Walters, who is on vacation, and Sam Donaldson in Washington.
Moscow charges 2 American reporters with slander. This is John Scally.
A new report warns of asbestos dangers to the nation's school children. This is Jules Bergman.
More deaths in the fighting in Rhodesia. Howard Tuckner reports.
$200,000 for this porcelain parrot, just part of the sale of the century. I'm Greg Dobbs.
Good evening. John Crawford hugged his fiancée and burst into tears today in his Moscow hotel room, a room also occupied by 2 Soviet KGB agents. Crawford is the American businessman who had been mysteriously jailed by the Russians 2 weeks ago. He was released today saying only, "I'm fine, I'll have a statement tomorrow." More from Moscow and Charles Bierbauer.
When American businessman Jay Crawford was arrested 2 weeks ago, it was widely assumed that the Soviets would try to swap his freedom for that of the 2 Russians jailed on spy charges in the U.S. But American embassy officials who were aware of some negotiations were surprised by the timing of Crawford's release. And even after the Russians were let go, embassy officials here knew nothing of the deal. The American consular officer who has visited Crawford regularly since his arrest arrived at his office in the morning asking, "Where is Crawford?" Crawford was then still in Moscow's Lefortovo prison, awaiting his release into the custody of American Ambassador Malcolm Toon. A brief statement issued after an embassy staff meeting said only that an understanding had been reached by the ambassador and Mr. Crawford, and that Crawford would remain available to Soviet authorities who have charged the American businessman with currency violations. Whether Crawford will ever stand trial is uncertain. The spy trial of the 2 Russians is set for September. The diplomatic climate, chilled by Crawford's arrest, will warm somewhat with his release. The whole incident is without precedent here, and diplomatic sources suggest one of the most confusing affairs they have witnessed. Charles Bierbauer, ABC News, Moscow.
This is John Scally in Washington. To add further to the confusion and concern, the Soviet government has suddenly charged 2 American newsmen in Moscow with slander. It is an unprecedented action. Reporter Craig Whitney of the New York Times and Harold Piper of the Baltimore Sun were told to appear in a civil court tomorrow. The accusations against the 2 were not spelled out. Both immediately denied any wrongdoing and were promptly backed up by their editors. The 2 reporters suspected that articles they wrote last month during a visit to Soviet Georgia are the target of the charges. At that time, they wrote that friends of a Soviet dissident said his confession had been fabricated as part of a Soviet television program. In a telephone call from Moscow to ABC News in Washington, reporter Whitney discussed the case with Sam Donaldson.
What have you done that has displeased them?
The only thing we can think of that it might have so displeased them was an article that, an interview that both of us had with relatives of a dissident in Georgia at the end of May, in which these relatives claimed that a televised confession he had made and repentance of his activities had been fabricated by the authorities. That's probably what this case is about, but we have no direct information about it from the court.
Here in Washington, Soviet Ambassador Dobrynin said the 2 men had nothing to fear if they had not broken the law. But when Dobrynin called here at the State Department, he found Secretary Vance deeply concerned about whether the accusations had been deliberately rigged to reinforce demands for the immediate return home of 2 accused Russian spies. The 2 former UN employees are now in Dobrynin's custody, pending a trial scheduled for sometime in September. It's clear the Soviets would like to swap the 2 Soviet agents even up for the American businessman that they released temporarily from jail today. But some administration officials believe it would be a one-sided deal strongly tilted in favor of the Soviets, and that Moscow should be pressured to give up more in order to make it an even trade. Thus, the concern about the fate of American reporters. Some key officials believe that Moscow is now signaling that it will not hesitate to crack down even harder against the American press unless the accused Soviet spies are allowed to return home free. John Scally, ABC News at the State Department.
In a Moscow street today, outside the Intourist Hotel, a young Russian night watchman went berserk with an axe, killing 2 elderly Swedish tourists, severely injuring a third. 7 Pentecostalists from Siberia barricaded themselves inside the U.S. Embassy in Moscow today. They said they won't leave until the Soviet Union gives them exit visas. There was another Soviet space launch today. On board, a Russian pilot and a researcher, the first Polish cosmonaut ever to go into space. The pair will link up with 2 cosmonauts already in orbit. And the White House announced today it is sending a high-level delegation of 14 American scientists to Peking next week. They'll have 4 days of discussions with Chinese scientists. In recent weeks, a number of U.S. scientists have canceled trips to Russia to protest Soviet treatment of dissidents.
Coming up, Jules Bergman with a report on the danger of asbestos in schools.
Denture wearers, kiss ordinary toothpaste goodbye.
Bye.
And say hello to new denture cream, the denture toothpaste with mint.
Hello, Mint.
Hello, mint.
Hello, Mint.
You know Denture Cream's anti-yellowing formula gets rid of dingy yellow film. It's specially made for cleaning dentures, and now it has mint. Kiss ordinary toothpaste goodbye.
Bye.
And say hello to new Denture Cream with the toothpaste flavor of mint.
Hello, Mint.
A great car price starts with a great car. So I bought this new Pontiac Grand Prix with its classic style. Because of its modest base price, I was able to add sport mirrors, white wall radials, deluxe wheel covers, front bumper guards, even a V8, power steering and brakes, automatic transmission, and Delco AM radio. A Grand Prix sticker priced at just $58.35. Now that's a great reason to see your Pontiac dealer.
A conference on environmental hazards being held in New York reported today that thousands of low-income families in Puerto Rico face cancer risks because of asbestos dust flaking off of building materials in their homes. And a U.S. government report out tonight makes the same finding of danger regarding building materials containing asbestos used in some American schools. More on that from Jules Bergman.
It's these tiny fibers that are the killers. Smaller than dust, smaller than most bacteria, and many viruses. Invisible in most cases, except with electron microscopes. The asbestos menace in our schools was really discovered here in Howell Township, New Jersey in 1976. Because of this and other New Jersey schools which have the problem, the government funded a full-scale study to see just how widespread it was. The finding? 10% of New Jersey's 2,000 schools used asbestos, and 1/3 of those had sprayed asbestos on ceilings and walls in student areas. And here in New York, nearly 20% of the city's 1,000 schools were found to have asbestos. This junior high will be the first school in the city to be repaired starting next month, the beginning of a multi-million-dollar job. The cafeteria, music room, and band room all have asbestos used for noise control. This cafeteria has an asbestos ceiling that was sprayed on. You can see how easily it dents, starting the flaking process that creates danger for all those who breathe it in. What should you do if your child is in a school with asbestos?
If the kids don't smoke, that will protect them from the worst sort of danger that asbestos can give them. So that's a very clear recommendation. Don't smoke. Secondly, to work with the schools to determine if there is asbestos in the ceilings and walls, and if there is, either remove it or seal it.
So today's report is a warning that thousands of schools across the nation have asbestos. And because of the time lag, the long latency period, what youngsters breathe in now can start asbestos disease 15 to 30 years later. Asbestos disease that can be fatal. This is Jules Bergman, ABC News, New York.
Another problem that has worsened over the years is the decay of the U.S. railroad system. No solution has been very successful. One recent attempt was the formation of Conrail. The hope was that costs would be brought under control. Today's Senate hearings began in New York to see how well or how badly that effort is going. ABC Economics editor Dan Kortz looks at the situation.
This is the way Vernon Conway spends much of his time these days. But that's not bad. He's collecting $1,900 a month as a laid-off trailer repairman for Pennsylvania Trucking Lines, a subsidiary of Conrail. And he'll keep on getting it until he retires 13 years from now. When 6 bankrupt railroads in the East and Midwest were combined in 1973 to form Conrail, Congress okayed $250 million to pay workers who were dropped, laid off, or downgraded. The idea was to help trim the payroll so Conrail could make a profit. But Penn trucking workers say the company is now paying outside firms to do the work that used to be done by the laid-off workers. That lowers Conrail's reported costs, but sticks the taxpayers.
You have people that's sitting home being paid their normal salary, to me they're paying double the price.
The company claims it's all perfectly legitimate.
We are trying to just about eliminate that trucking business. And this is the means by which we, just like we're trying to eliminate lots of the railroad business. I mean, after all, it's part and parcel of the same activity.
All the same, that $250 million fund, which was supposed to last 40 years, will now run out by 1980. The Senate subcommittee hearings that started today here in New York are looking into that and other criticisms of Conrail. Chairman George McGovern, angry because Conrail's chief executive didn't show up, charged the company doesn't bother to keep Congress informed of its problems. And Congressman Toby Moffett, a Connecticut Democrat, made public a confidential Conrail memo that said the company may need as much as $4 billion more in government funds to be successful. Moffett indicated he won't vote for it.
We have neither profit now nor good service. We have neither efficiency nor accountability to the Congress. So we're losing both ways.
Conrail has now lost more than $500 million, and that performance means that when these hearings are over, it may have a tough time getting the additional billions in government subsidies that it says it needs. Dan Courts, ABC News, New York.
Vice President Mondale added his voice to the president's today in calling for the resignation of David Gartner from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. A longtime friend of Gartner's, Mondale said he, too, thinks the fact Gartner's children were once given a gift of stock in a large grain concern undercuts Gartner's ability to serve on a commission that regulates commodities, including grain. But Mondale conceded that White House officials and the Senate knew all about the gift when Gartner was nominated and confirmed. More on that from Bettina Gregory.
The White House counsel's office said it had full knowledge of David Gartner's financial affairs, that it had evaluated his file but concluded there was not enough of a problem to alert the president that Gartner should not be appointed. So the White House says the president never knew about Gartner's dealings until after he'd been confirmed by the Senate Agriculture Committee. By yesterday, the president was not only questioning his counsel's office judgment on forwarding this nomination, he was calling for Gartner's resignation.
I believe, though, in light of the fact that there is an allegation of impropriety on his part, with which I agree, that he should resign.
Despite the heat from the top, Gartner told Roger Peterson yesterday and reaffirmed to ABC News today he will not resign.
I think I should also point out that that the president asked for my resignation based on allegations of an impropriety rather than an impropriety. And I think there's something that's rather important about that.
The Senate committee has recalled Gartner for more questioning tomorrow, but since he's already been confirmed, neither Congress nor the president can force him out of office. The White House admits it's been embarrassed by the whole affair, but pressed on whether screening procedures for federal appointees should be tightened up, White House News Secretary Jody Powell said no. With hundreds of appointees, Powell said, the case of David Gartner was just one of those things. Bettina Gregory, ABC News, the White House.
Demonstrators paraded in front of the federal courthouse in New York today, denouncing Attorney General Griffin Bell. Inside, the judge reserved decision on whether to hold Bell in contempt for refusing to turn over files of FBI informants. The case involves FBI spying on the Socialist Workers' Party. Richard Nixon's publisher says the former president's memoirs have already sold more than 250,000 copies at $20 each, in spite of some critical scorn and an attempted reader's boycott. Last night, at a home game in Anaheim of the California Angels, Mr. Nixon responded to some basic questions.
How's Mrs. Nixon?
Oh, she's just fine, and she's an Angel fan, as I am.
Are you planning to make some more public appearances, Mr. Nixon?
Well, I don't consider this a public appearance. I think that the fact that I'm able to go to a ball game, I haven't been able to do much of that in recent years. I really don't intend to do very much of it in the future, because, as you know, it really greatly inconveniences a lot of people when a president or even a former president, with all the Secret Service that the law requires, are around you. Gene Autry was very cordial about it, but I know that he would have liked to have had about 4 or 5 of those seats that our guys took for some of his other friends, so I won't bother him too often.
What's wrong, Charlie?
I'm sorry. My doctor says caffeine makes me nervous, but I just don't like decaffeinated coffee.
Even new Sanka brand? It now has more real coffee aroma and taste than ever.
Smells real.
Try it.
Now that's real coffee. I feel terrific.
It shows.
Well, you showed me real coffee taste.
New Sanka brand decaffeinated coffee. More real coffee aroma and taste.
Little Peggy! Welcome to the family reunion! Wow! Little Peggy! Aww! Oh, little Peggy! Little good boy!
Even when you can't hold up any longer, your hair still looks great with Final Net. And now Final Net introduces the new Sure Aim pump for finer, mistier mist. Final Net holds up longer than you do.
Little Peggy baked these herself.
It happens so suddenly. You're not a girl anymore. You have to take care of your appearance, not leave it to chance. Many women have discovered a secret for taking care of their skin. Oil overlay. Use it on the makeup. It's not greasy, yet it eases dryness to help give you skin that's fresh and younger looking. Isn't that the only kind you ever want?
Oil of Olay, so every age can be the best you've ever looked.
Listen to your kitten purr. You don't want fleas to torture her. That's why your precious ball of fur wears the Hearts 2-in-1 Plus collar. As she grows, while it keeps her free of itchy, ugly, nasty fleas, it protects your home, your family. The Hearts 2-in-1 Plus collar.
Get the longest-lasting collar ever from Hearts.
Put the plus on your pet. The Hearts 2-in-1 Plus.
In Rhodesia, 4 members of Bishop Abba Mazawea's United African National Council have been reported killed trying to persuade black guerrillas to lay down their arms. One of the major units of the Rhodesian Army moving against the guerrillas is the Sela Scouts. Howard Tuckner watched them in action.
From the moment they arrive at this training camp at Lake Kariba, Selu Scout volunteers are taught how to live in the bush. They are taught how to make fire with twigs and elephant manure. By eating the bark of trees, they put together tough string that is used for various purposes in the bush. One of the chief uses is to make web netting to carry their water canteens and ammunition magazines for their rifles.
By now, they're extremely tired, almost exhausted, and they haven't had any commercial kind of food for about a month.
On this day, the Selu Scout volunteers get a lesson, and considering how hungry they are, get what they will soon feel is a treat. A buck has been killed. The instructor tells them how important it is to live off whatever they can find while on military operations in the bush. They are taught how wild game can provide instant protein when eaten raw, and how water can be extracted from the intestines of animals. They drink the putrid water.
Can you people come on, some of you youngsters? Jump up here. Is that nice? Yes, sir. Raw liver, once you've accepted the taste, is probably better tasting than cooked liver. I don't want to see anybody spitting it out. Get used to it. It's important, and it's for your own good.
We want to teach you how to survive in the bush. We want to teach you that the bush is not an unfriendly place. It's neutral. It neither kills you or looks after you. It's up to you. If you understand it and you know it, you will live as if you're lost. If you don't understand it, you'll die. It's as easy as that.
They are taught about snakes for 2 reasons. One is potential food. Secondly, to protect themselves from lethal snake bite in the bush. On this day, a puff adder bites even the most experienced instructor. A bite from a puff adder can kill a man within 1 to 6 hours. They do what they can for the Selu Scout instructor here at the camp, but they do not have the proper snake bite serum. They would have to evacuate him to a hospital on the mainland. For Selu Scout volunteers, it goes on unceasingly, day in, day out. Those who qualify will probably be among the toughest soldiers in the world. Howard Tuckner, ABC News, with the Salut Scouts, Rhodesia.
Coming up, Greg Dobbs with a report on a multi-million-dollar art auction.
One day, cheese went out of my life. I found out this innocent-looking slice of American cheese has about 100 calories. That's as much as this slice of angel cake with chocolate syrup. Sure, I watch my figure. But give up cheese? Me? Luckily, along came Lightline, processed cheese product that tastes like crave, but only half the calories of ordinary American cheese. Fresh-tasting, delicious Lightline with half the calories.
One of the things that Buick's always worked with best is the idea of room. The amount of room for families and things, and the kind of room for luxury. Now, this Buick LeSabre not only has room for 6 people, it's also well, it's a heck of a nice place for them to be. Frankly, Buick thinks that with that much comfort and that much luxury, the LeSabre, dollar for dollar, might be their very best value. I wouldn't argue with that.
You know what traveler's checks are for. Traveling. But did you ever think how valuable they could be right around home for those unexpected times you find yourself without cash? Here's a suggestion. When you come back from a trip, save your last American Express traveler's check. Stick it in your wallet and leave it there. Now you've got emergency money when you need it. And it's safe money. If you should lose it, you can get it back. American Express traveler's checks. Save one, because someday it could save you.
Ballpark Franks, they plump when you cook them. Ballpark Franks, when the Franks cook bigger, you gotta figure they're Ballpark Franks. They plump when you cook them. Ballpark Franks.
Ballpark Franks are plump full of juicy red beef, lean meaty pork, and young tender veal, so they plump when you cook them.
Those Franks on the fire get longer and higher, they're Ballpark Franks. They plump when you cook them. Ballpark Franks.
The Senate today moved to block President Carter from imposing import fees on foreign oil, something he says he'll do if Congress doesn't pass his proposed oil equalization tax. A White House spokesman accused the Senate of trying to duck a tough problem and said the president's reaction to the move was one of disgust. There's good news to report today in the chronic battle of the trade deficit. Although the U.S. chalked up a deficit of almost $2.25 billion in May, that's the lowest figure in 8 months. For the past week, the London auction house of Sotheby's has been selling a single art collection, and $30 million is the take so far. Greg Dobbs was on hand for part of the action.
The 1940 composition by Matisse. I have a bid of £100,000, or 100,000.
For the oil by Matisse, bidding began at £100,000.
250,000, 260,000. 270,000, 280,000, 290,000, 300,000.
Bidders quickly pushed the price up to $310,000, well over $500,000, which is how it's been here for a week. Remarkable pieces, record prices. Nearly $200,000 was paid this morning for this rare porcelain parrot. Nearly $1 million last week for this 550-year-old Italian altarpiece. And this, a medieval enamel medallion less than 6 inches across, was the prize of the auction, selling for £1.2 million, or nearly $2.25 million. Some of the biggest bidders and buyers were German museums, operating as a group with matching funds from their government, purchasing pieces that Robert von Hirsch took with him as a Jew fleeing Germany in the 1930s. But bidders came from everywhere, and even participated from 4 cities elsewhere by phone.
The very back of the room, 35,000. 40,000 in New York, 45,000.
One of the truly incredible things about an auction like this, besides the prices, is the mood. Watch what happened after this early Picasso was sold for more than $250,000. Hardly pandemonium. There are, after all, more losers than winners here. Those who can't keep up as the bidding rises. Those who fear they'll never again have the chance to buy such rare and beautiful works of art. But the feeling is they will. The feeling is there are bound to be more sales of the century before the century passes.
9,000.
I'm Greg Dobbs, ABC News in London.
More than 6,000 people rampaged through the Mexican border city of Matamoros last night, protesting police brutality. At least 35 people were injured before Mexican federal police finally gained the upper hand. Witnesses say the rampage began when police tried to break up a demonstration against alleged police harassment of students. It was a name-dropper's paradise in Monte Carlo today. Celebrities gathered for tomorrow's wedding of Monaco's Princess Caroline and French businessman Philippe Junot. Cary Grant's and Gregory Peck's cars collided in front of David Niven's house on their way to a wedding eve party. It was the biggest party since Caroline's mother and father were married back in the 50s. Pierre Salinger reminisces.
22 years ago, it was a storybook wedding. A Prince Charming presiding over a toy kingdom and the most glamorous movie star in America. Prince Rainier of Monaco and Grace Kelly were the toast of the world. Tomorrow it's the turn of their 21-year-old daughter, the Princess Caroline, who will marry a 38-year-old Paris real estate dealer, Philippe Junot, until now best known for his frequent sorties in Paris nightclubs. The trappings of a royal wedding are all there. The flags are being raised. The European press, though uninvited to the proceedings, is filling its pages with pictures of Caroline and Philippe. The souvenir dealers count on land office business from the thousands of tourists attracted by a royal marriage. But times have changed. Royalty is going downhill in Europe. And those who have been invited to the ceremony better enjoy it, for there may not be many royal weddings in the future. This is Pierre Salinger, ABC News, Monte Carlo.
How does a mother of 3 watch her weight and nutrition?
I start my day with the Kellogg's Special K breakfast.
Good for you.
Coffee, juice.
Good for you.
High-protein Special K cereal.
Good for you.
A teaspoon of sugar and 4 ounces of skim milk.
Good for you.
It's serious nutrition for weight-conscious adults with protein, vitamins, and iron for less than 240 calories.
And delicious.
Good for you, Special K.
Good for me.
Bert and Sally will marry. Penny and Rob will split.
Imagine that.
Just 2 of 60 fascinating predictions in this week's National Enquirer. Fantastic forecasts about the world and its famous people, plus the untold story of how Jackie Gleason hid his agonizing pain so the show could go on, how you can reduce heart attack risk by eating cereal fiber, and how to look 10 pounds slimmer just by wearing the right clothes. Over 100 untold stories and 60 predictions in this week's National Enquirer.
I wouldn't miss it, don't you?
Again, tonight's top stories. An American businessman is released from jail in Russia, but 2 American newsmen in Moscow are charged with slander. And a new report warns of asbestos dangers in the nation's schools. That's the news. Good night.
This has been the ABC Evening News with Harry Reisner and Barbara Walters.
This is Alec Gifford, News Scene 8 in half an hour. The headlines of the news. The lights were dimmed at many offices throughout New Orleans today. The power cutbacks are in effect. The power companies say they are pleased. The battle over sales tax increase for New Orleans continues. The mayor does not like the latest proposal. Neither does the Orleans Parish School Board. And we'll tell you the story from Action Reporter on a guy who tackled the New Orleans Police Department over some illegally parked police cars, and he won. News Scene 8 in 30 minutes. Stay tuned.
News Scene 8 headlines brought to you by American Rent-All. We rent just about everything.
Have a big cement slab to break? Don't spend $5,000 on equipment. Rent it from American Rent-All.
American Rent-All, 11 locations.
We rent just about everything. You don't need a large air compressor to break up 4-inch thick pavement. Rent this electric one from American Rent-All.
American Rent-All, 11 locations.
So we rent just about everything. American Rent-All rents this electric hammer. It drills holes in concrete up to 4 inches.
American Rent-All, 11 locations.
We rent just about everything.
News Scene 8 headlines were brought to you by American Rent-All. We rent just about everything. Watch The Rookies weeknights at 11.